said she never wanted kids. So what changed?
If it weren't for the baby.
There's a lot of opinions about the ending of Mockingjay, specifically about Katniss and Peeta having children. There's people that love it and see it as a symbol of hope and healing, people who believe Katniss was pressured by Peeta into having kids, people who think Katniss and Peeta were too traumatized to have kids, period, and people who see Katniss's motherhood as reductive and corny. Hot takes all around. But which take is accurate? Let's dive in. This is all based on the book canon of the Hunger Games trilogy, so let's start with the facts of what actually went down in the text. The Mockingjay epilogue begins with Katniss watching her children. They play in the meadow, the dancing girl with the dark hair and blue eyes, the boy with blonde curls and gray eyes, struggling to keep up with her on his chubby toddler legs. So firstborn is a girl and the second is a boy, and they're both cute mixes of their parents in terms of hair and eye color. I'm honestly so thankful the names of the kids aren't said in the book. Twilight and Harry Potter ruined the whole sentimental name thing for me. I'm sure Suzanne Collins would have written names worlds better than Renesmee, but still. And here's my pitches for cursed names of Katniss and Peeta's kids. Finrose for the girl, Finnick and Primrose, and Rinna for the boy, as in Rue and Cinna. Drop your cursed names in the comments. Let's make something awful. This next part of the epilogue is the one that stirs up a lot of controversy. It took 5, 10, 15 years for me to agree, but Peeta wanted them so badly. Many people take this to mean Peeta pressured Katniss into having kids she did not want. And I can see how reading that line out of context could lead someone to that conclusion. Like, oh, it's just another man taking away a woman's freedom by forcing her into motherhood, which is a real thing and an issue in the world. But within the context of the entire story and the characters of Katniss and Peeta, that's not the case. First of all, it's nearly impossible to make Katniss do something she doesn't want to do. She's stubborn and headstrong. Like, even when she was training to be a soldier in District 13, her inability to take orders was singled out as her biggest weakness. Sure, in the 15 years or so after the trilogy, she hopefully had some growth in the stubbornness department, but still. Secondly, anyone who says Peeta would pressure Katniss into doing something she doesn't want to do, especially something as serious as having kids, doesn't know his character at all. Seriously, go and reread the trilogy if you think Peeta would do anything like that. I mean, he's not Gale. Just kidding, I didn't say that. And if you're saying, but Peeta is such a smooth talker, he can manipulate people like he did during his Capitol interviews. Well, he was manipulating the crowd in the hopes that it would save Katniss's life. He's not a sociopath like President Snow. Peeta uses his words to help people. Even though he was hijacked and temporarily psycho, he didn't stay that way. Peeta's not an alpha male weirdo looking for a trad wife. He is the trad wife. He's spending his days baking and painting and gardening. And if Peeta really was using his 4D chess level mind game powers to coerce Katniss to have kids, it wouldn't have taken him 15 years to get her on board. Peeta expressing his desire to have children to the person he's in a long-term committed relationship with isn't malicious or toxic. It's normal. He also stayed in a relationship with Katniss for 15 years, so it's not like he was making ultimatums about how he'll leave her if she won't have his babies. Peeta would never. He loved Katniss and wanted to be with her, period. Peeta had been pining for Katniss since they were 5 years old. There's nothing in the text to give the impression that the future of their relationship was contingent on having kids. We get a moment in Catching Fire where Peeta tells her that she is going to make a great mother when he's trying to convince her not to sacrifice her life to save him. He wanted her to live on and feel free to have a family with Gale someday if that's what she wanted. Katniss does not want that with Gale. It's never been part of her plan, and things that if either her or Peeta can be a parent, anyone can see it should be Peeta. And as she's falling asleep, she's trying to imagine a world with no games, no capital, a place like the meadow in the song I sang to Rue as she died, where Peeta's child could be safe. Foreshadowed the whole epilogue right there in chapter 24 of Catching Fire. Both of them put each other on a pedestal at that point since they were in love. Katniss saw Peeta as the purest, kindest soul, and he saw her as the most inspirational, bravest person ever. So after 15 years of being with Peeta, living in a free Panem with no Hunger Games, Katniss finally felt ready ready and secure enough to have kids. She was 17 at the end of the war and had her first child at about 32 and is telling the epilogue in her mid to late 30s. Even without having gone through a revolution, a person hopefully grows and changes a lot between the ages of 17 and 32. I mean, I'm almost 30 and thank goodness I'm not the same as I was when I was 17. Good lord. On to the next part of the epilogue. When I first felt her stirring inside of me, I was consumed with a terror that felt as old as life itself. Only the joy of holding her in my arms could tame it. Carrying him was a little easier, but not much. Katniss had a hard time mentally during pregnancy, particularly with anxiety, which makes sense for her, and from what I've read, is extremely common for people even if they don't have PTSD like Katniss. I know she isn't explicitly diagnosed with PTSD or anything in the books, but she fits the diagnostic criteria for PTSD and major depression at points in the story, so I see it as canon. Anyways, Katniss had anxiety during her pregnancies and felt much better postpartum. And if I let myself think about her and Peeta meeting their babies for the first time, I will start to tear up, so I need to move on. A big point of contention around Katniss having children is an exchange between her and Gale in chapter 1 of The Hunger Games. She's 16 and he's 18. She and Gale are in the woods together the morning of the reaping, and Gale says that they could leave the district, run off, live in the woods. You and I, we could make it if we didn't have so many kids. The kids he's referring to are their siblings, and Katniss mentally counts both of their mothers as kids too, because how would they live without her and Gale? Katniss thinks what Gale says about running away is so preposterous and tells him, I never want to have kids. I might if I didn't live here, says Gale. But you do, I say, irritated. Forget it, he snaps back. The conversation feels all wrong. Leave? How could I leave Prim, who is the only person in the world I'm certain I love? And Gale is devoted to his family. We can't leave, so why bother talking about it? And even if we did, where did this stuff about having kids come from? Yes, Katniss says she never wanted to have kids here, but let's look at the context. She doesn't want kids because the world they live in and the idea of living under different circumstances where she is free is so unbelievable to her that she doesn't consider it as a possibility whatsoever. Remember, at the start of the story, Katniss doesn't have any hopes of a revolution. That's not on her radar. She's just doing whatever she can with the hand she's been dealt, working hard every day to prevent herself and her family from starving to death. That is her life, and that's how she thinks her life always will be. To her, having a kid would just be burdening herself with another mouth to feed, and then she'd have to live in constant fear of losing them to the games. It makes sense that at this point in her life, she believes she never wants to have kids. And reminder, she is a teenager here, not an adult. Her reasoning for not wanting to have kids isn't that she doesn't like children or wants to have personal independence or anything like that. It's specifically about the fact that the world she lives in is unsafe for children. In Catching Fire, after Peeta made the fake baby announcement, Katniss thinks, isn't it the thing I dreaded most about the wedding, about the future, the loss of my children to the games? And it could be true now, couldn't it? If I hadn't spent my life building up layers of defenses until I recoil at even the suggestion of marriage or a family? Side note, I know I'm gonna get this comment because people always do this whenever I talk about the baby announcement. Katniss did not think she was pregnant when Peeta said if it weren't for the baby. I see incorrect comments like, Peeta was so convincing that Katniss actually thought she was pregnant for a minute, which is wildly untrue. She is thinking about the effect of this lie about her being pregnant is having on the crowd. Even the most capital-loving, games-hungry, bloodthirsty person out there can't ignore, at least for a moment, how horrific the whole thing is. I am pregnant. The audience can't absorb the news right away. People must be misremembering that line of I am pregnant and rewriting it in their head as am I pregnant? Katniss knows how babies are made, y'all. I'm sure her mom gave her the talk. She knows Peeta didn't get her pregnant from kissing and cuddling on the train. Give our girl some credit. She never thought she was pregnant. End of story. Katniss spent her life building up defenses against the possibility of getting married or having kids because she was so terrified of her children being taken away for the games. She decided she would never let herself fall in love because then she would end up getting pregnant and then the Capitol could take her kid away. Katniss basically treated Prim like her own child after their father died, and Katniss was 11 and Prim was 7, and she cared for her as a parent ever since. For the longest time, Prim was the only person in the world she absolutely knew she loved, and she did everything she could to keep Prim safe. She took out Tesserae, hunted, and traded to make sure Prim wouldn't fall victim to the Capitol's starvation or the games. Katniss basically lived through her worst fear, having her child get taken away when Effie called Prim's name at the reaping. At least then she could volunteer in her place, but if she'd been Prim's mother, she wouldn't have been able to do that. So before the 74th games, Katniss was terrified of having kids, and then after it, she was even more terrified, having gone through the trauma of hearing her baby sister's name called. Katniss then projects her parental relationship with Prim onto Rue. One of the reasons she chose to ally with Rue is that she reminded her of Prim. Katniss is so sweet with her. She feeds her, she shares her sleeping bag with her, and then she watches her die in the games. It's horrific, and since Rue is standing in as her little sister who she treated like her own child, it's extra devastating. And then, of course, Prim died a year and a half later. Katniss couldn't protect her from the tumultuous world they were living in. So on top of the grief of losing her beloved sister, Katniss is hammered again with this painful belief that she cannot keep the people she loves safe. She has a lot to work through before she could ever feel secure enough to have kids. After Katniss and Gale had that exchange about running away, Katniss mused about how she's confused by him bringing up having kids since there's never been anything romantic between them, and if he wants kids, Gale wouldn't have any trouble finding a wife. Since Katniss doesn't want kids pre-revolution, she also doesn't plan to get married. Based on what we know about District 12, getting married means having kids, and apparently you are assigned a house once you're married, and that might be the only way to get new housing in 12. We don't know. I know some people ask, why does anyone in District 12 or any of the non-career districts even have kids since they live in such awful circumstances? Well, if all humans stopped having kids whenever the world was a mess, we'd have gone extinct as a species a long time ago. Birth rates can definitely slow during hardships, but they don't go down to zero. There's plenty of reasons people would be having kids in Panem. First of all, people in the districts most likely don't have access to contraceptives because the capital needs the population to grow. They need a steady stream of human labor to exploit. I imagine the capital either doesn't send the districts any form of contraceptives for adults. How they deal with kids eligible for the Hunger Games getting pregnant is a whole other topic to theorize. And if the capital does offer contraceptives to adults, they would be far too expensive for regular people to afford. If two people who are biologically able to make a kid want to go to bed together, they don't have the best tools to minimize the chance of pregnancy. Their options are to take the risk, use DIY contraceptives, get intimate in other ways, or be abstinent. Plus, the capital most likely does not provide the medical care needed to safely end a pregnancy if that was desired. Also, a reminder that some women and girls in Panem needed to go to bed with people in order to survive. And there's also the issue of violent, unwanted interactions happening that could result in pregnancy. TLDR, people in the districts have a high risk of unplanned pregnancies. District folks may also want to have kids for several reasons. They could be in love with their partner and want to have a family together. Maybe they find that their hard lives are made better by having kids. Love and family. Maybe they want kids because they're able to have them take out Tesserae, which are food rations for the entire family. Maybe they want kids as a retirement plan, someone to take care of them when they're too old or unwell to work. Maybe they're merchants who want to pass down the family business. There's reasons for the people in Panem to have kids, and many people are able to live with the risk of losing their kids to the games. The pros outweigh the cons for them. And I'm sure plenty of people were of the same mind as Katniss, choosing not to have any kids and possibly abstaining from any romantic relationships. The risk of your kid going into the games varies not just by district, but by social class. District 12 is the smallest and poorest in Panem. They had less than 10,000 people. Since there's less kids' names in the Reaping Bowl, there is more risk of getting chosen, unfortunately. Everyone is poor, but the Seam coal miner class is significantly poorer than the merchant class. The Seam kids tend to take out Tesserae in order for their families to survive, and this increases their odds of getting picked since you get additional slips of paper with your name on them as a price for the Tesserae rations. Merchant kids have less chance of getting picked, except for when the reaping is rigged for certain tributes. By the way, I don't think every pair of tributes is handpicked by the capital, but I think there is a fair amount of rigging so they can punish certain people, instill fear in the more well-off merchants, and make a good cast of tributes. We know District 11 is also very poor, but it is huge, so there's more kids in the pool and lower odds for your own kid getting picked. We don't know much about the sizes of the other districts, but they're bigger than 12. For families that need to take out Tesserae, they might choose to have several kids and have one basically become the sacrificial lamb, taking out Tesserae for each family member so the other kids don't have to take out any. One kid gets all the extra slips of paper in the bowl instead of all of them, assuming the family can survive on that amount of rations. Katniss and Gale had planned to do this for their siblings. Then for the career districts 1, 2, and 4, the majority of the tributes are volunteers. Families in those districts may be eager to have their kids go into the games since it's seen as an honor. Plus, if their kid wins, their family will be rich and high class. All right, back to Katniss and Peeta's kids. The epilogue continues with Katniss thinking about how she'll explain the Hunger Games and her and Peeta's role in them to their children when they're older, without frightening them to death. Her children are growing up in this better, safer world and don't yet understand the world their parents grew up in. They don't know they play on a graveyard, since the meadow was a mass grave for the people in 12 who didn't survive the fire bombings. She still has her PTSD-related nightmares that won't ever really go away, and feels depressed at times, unable to take pleasure in anything out of fear of it being taken away. Her go-to coping skill is making a list in her head of every act of goodness she's seen someone do. It's like a game, repetitive, even a little tedious after more than 20 years, but there are much worse games to play. Mic drop! Could not have asked for a better last line to the trilogy. Katniss continues to have mental health struggles, but she appears to be in a stable place with a support system and healthy coping mechanisms. She's in a much better headspace than she was at the end of the war. I'd say she's well enough to be a responsible parent and never would have been willing to become one if she wasn't healthy enough, and I'm confident Peeta wouldn't have wanted them to have kids at all if either of them weren't stable. Both Katniss and Peeta received treatment for their mental health pre-epilogue in Mockingjay. Peeta had to stay in the capital for a while after Coin's assassination, getting treatment, mainly therapy, with Dr. Aurelius. Peeta and Katniss both continued having therapy via telephone with him for an undetermined amount of time, which Katniss found helpful. So they're having therapy, they're working through their trauma. It's mentioned pre-epilogue that at times Peeta still has moments when he clutches the back of a chair and hangs on until the flashbacks are over. So we don't know if he continues to have flashbacks by the time he and Katniss have kids. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. Either way, this doesn't mean he's a dangerous person. I think people misinterpret that line to mean Peeta is still hijacked, that he'll black out and attack someone, which isn't true. Peeta recovered from his hijacking, aka brainwashing, but still has PTSD from everything he went through in the games and in the Capitol. Clutching a chair is a solid way to ground yourself during a flashback. If Katniss had said something like, Peeta still has moments when he screams that I'm a mutt and tries to strangle me, then yeah, I'd say he's still hijacked. But that wasn't happening. He experiences flashbacks sometimes when he's awake, and Katniss sometimes has flashbacks when she's asleep. Plenty of people live with chronic mental health issues and are still functioning members of society and loving parents. To be honest, arguing that Katniss and Peeta had no business having kids because they had lingering PTSD symptoms is an ignorant, prejudiced take. Also, Peeta unfortunately grew up in a violent household. His mother was the perpetrator. He knows what it's like growing up feeling afraid and unsafe around your parents, and knowing him as a character, he would never want his own children to experience anything remotely like that. If he felt ready to have kids, he was very stable and did not have dangerous hijacking episodes. Katniss and Peeta still have scars, mentally and physically, but they've healed a lot. They're able to support each other, move forwards, build a good life together, and eventually create new life. And they had already found meaning in their lives before having kids. Katniss never says that her life finally started once she became a mom or anything like that. The fact that she felt secure enough food-wise, partner-wise, and felt that the world was safe enough for children to live in is a beautiful way to end the story. She literally helped make the world a better place and is reaping the rewards. By the time Katniss ends up having children at the end of the trilogy, over 15 years have gone by, and for 13-ish years of that period, she'd been living in completely different circumstances. Just because Katniss had children doesn't make her any less of an empowered heroine, and it does not mean that she and Peeta are any more in love because they had kids. People can change their minds about having kids at any time for a plethora of reasons. It is a personal choice, and there are no wrong answers. If someone wants to be child-free, that's awesome, and if someone wants to have kids, that's awesome too. And the value and love in a relationship is not determined by whether or not you have kids. I'm saying all of this as someone who is not currently a parent, by the way. I'm still figuring my life out, so I'm not parked on either side of the child-full or child-free fence at this point in time, if that matters to you at all. If it wasn't already completely obvious, I love Katniss and Peeta's ending. I see Katniss having kids as an incredibly meaningful way to conclude her journey throughout the series, and full of love and hope and resilience. I'm also aware that my profound love for both of these characters prevents me from being unbiased, especially since Peeta is everything to me. That said, Everyone is entitled to their own opinion, so if you feel differently about Katniss having children, that's fine. We can agree to disagree. No need to get nasty. What's your stance? Did you like Katniss and Peeta's ending? Did you feel disappointed that she had kids? Let me know in the comments. If you haven't already, subscribe for more Hunger Games analysis content and do the thumbs up thing.